Volunteers wonder, what next? The house was dedicated January 31st, 1983. The volunteers had cleaned, painted, bagged for donations and outfitted the pantry. The rough gem on East 151st Street in the South Bronx was beginning to shine. The team invited all the volunteers to a celebration to give thanks for all the work done. Sister Ellie remembers that night very well. One of the clearest memories I have was the night it was dedicated. There was a big cake, and Andre asked me to read what was on the cake, and I read, "The little portion is because of you." And Andre said, "Yes, the little portion is because of you." The message was this place would not be except for all the volunteers, everybody. That was a wonderful night. Father Andre's words echoed the secular Franciscan rule. The Franciscan family, as one among many spiritual families raised up by the Holy Spirit in the Church, unites all members of the people of God, laity, religious, and priests, who recognize that they are called to follow Christ in the footsteps of Saint Francis of Assisi. Article 1. As the date for opening neared, some of the volunteers wondered, what next? They had devoted themselves to the renovations and made friends. Many were reluctant to walk away from the project. They felt connected to the building, to the team, but more importantly, they felt connected to one another. They also shared the vision one first seen by Father Andre, reaching out to the poor. A brochure made up by the team described the house as an oasis in the South Bronx, and indeed it was. The building was a house of prayer in the midst of aging and crumbling apartment buildings. It was a place for people to come and be filled, not just physically, but spiritually as well. The team was well suited for that. Father Andre brought vision and enthusiasm. Father Joe's quiet thoughtfulness and calm demeanor weathered any storm. And Sister Ellie brought a strong sense of peace and justice. The secular Franciscan fraternity that eventually came out of all this can trace its roots to the strength of the team in those early days. There was a good foundation because of the team's compassion for the poor, their work ethic, and trust in God. There was a core group of volunteers who did not see this as an end to their work at the house, but a beginning. A few days after the dedication, they gathered in a meeting room on the second floor of the retreat house. Many wanted to stay on and help, but somehow it didn't seem enough. For a while they talked around it. Many felt committed, invested in the dream and in each other. Once the intense work on the renovations and establishing the center was completed, the volunteers seemed to hang on, some very explicitly asking for closer connection to the ministry and the Franciscan backdrop of the little portion. So it entered my mind to propose the possibility of establishing a secular Franciscan fraternity, said Father Andre. Joe Petrona, in looking back, said he was attracted to the Franciscans as a way of living the gospel, letting the Spirit guide. He liked the idea of reaching out to the poor, marginalized, disenfranchised, those on the fringes of society, he said, and he felt called to follow Christ in the way of Saint Francis and Saint Clare. Most of those present that night had never heard of secular Franciscans. They were armed only with their initial intent to minister within their vocation of marriage or single life. Although the friars had little experience with the secular fraternity, they knew of the branch of the order that consisted of lay people who profess a Franciscan rule. They admitted they didn't know the specifics of how to form a secular fraternity, but they were willing to do the research and help establish it if the volunteers truly wanted it. The volunteers were intrigued. Only one, Henry Lowry, knew anything about secular Franciscans. Some feared the commitment, but others did not. Paul Cubiter remembers thinking, "What am I getting myself into?" No one really knew at that point, but everyone in that room was willing to take the next step to explore the option. They had grown closer over the month, almost like a family, and didn't want to let go of that. As the group explored the option of becoming seculars, it dawned on Larry Genova that becoming a secular wasn't going to change things much. The retreat house had become part of their lives, and he, his wife and children spent a great deal of time there. Working at the house was a priority for them. Unwittingly, they were living their vocation according to the rule, witnessing to the good yet to come, and obligated to acquire purity of heart because of the vocation they have embraced. They should set themselves free to love God and their brothers and sisters. Article 12. None of the volunteers had any idea of the hours of teaching they faced, the months of discernment, the enormity of the commitment, but some of them thirsted for it. They had been given a taste of community, and they wanted to continue on that road. "We were so committed," Pat Spanner recalled. And becoming a secular Franciscan was also a commitment to the house. Not all those who were present that night made it to profession nearly 2 years later. Some dropped out, others still kept ties to the little portion and the team. They continued to serve in their own capacities. Those who stayed were armed only with their initial dream, to minister with the Lord within their vocation of marriage or single life. No one had ever met a secular Franciscan, yet they were convinced they wanted to make the commitment. Later on, they realized that the call to this life was placed in their hearts by God. They wanted to go forth as witnesses and instruments of the Church's mission among all people, proclaiming Christ by their life and words. Article 6. A core group remained steadfast. They embarked on the long road and, guided by the team's leadership, 14 volunteers entered into formation. Becoming a secular Franciscan is no easy task. It takes time, study, and guidance before professing the rule. There are several phases: orientation, inquiry, and candidacy. Their volunteer efforts with the retreat house had already satisfied the orientation requirement, a time of determining interest in the order. Initial formation includes the inquiry and candidacy phases. During this time, candidates are required to attend teachings on Franciscan history and the secular Franciscan rule. Prayer and community are strongly encouraged. This gives candidates the chance to fully understand the secular Franciscan way of life. This is a vocation, a lifelong commitment. As scary as that may have sounded at the time, it was a commitment that was embraced.